time, no particular media was my favorite. I tried them all as I took the courses to get my art degree. But now I know my favorite is watercolor. And I paint many different things. I'll paint flowers, which is what I really love to do. Houses. Animals.
Good news can happen anywhere. Stay tuned. Can happen anywhere. Well, actually, good news doesn't just happen here as if by accident. It's made here. My name is Sister Sharon Rose Terbrock. I'm a school sister of Notre Dame, and the theme of our series is Good News in Our Neighborhood. As we look for good news to bring to you each week, we have to admit there is a lot of good news happening right here in our mother house. The headquarters, as it were, of the School Sisters of Notre Dame of the St. Louis province. We School Sisters of Notre Dame have at the heart of our mission to bring good news to everyone we meet, wherever we are and wherever God sends us. This week brings us to Sister JO Nemec, who brings good news through the teaching of art. Sister paints with watercolors, and she enjoys sharing with others the secrets of her fascination of painting with watercolors.
And watercolor has more techniques to it than any other media. People think there's only one thing in watercolor and you put it down and that's it. There's all kinds of things you can do with watercolor.
Sister JO Nemec has art class in one of the large rooms of Maria Center, also located on this property. The students in her class are usually adults who have found time in their week to explore a more creative side in themselves through art.
There's all kinds of things you can do with watercolor, all kinds of little tricks and fix-ups. And sometimes you start the painting one way and you get another idea from what happened that you thought was bad or wrong, and it could end up to be the neatest painting in the end because you tried something else and it worked. So there's always that surprise element in watercolor. And I like its flexibility. You know, you can use a big brush, you can use a little brush, you can use lots of paint or more water. So there's always that surprise element in watercolor that isn't always in every other media.
I'm painting this. I thought this was so restful and beautiful. So I decided to paint it.
What painting are you doing?
It's watercolor.
Watercolor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you feel like you've learned?
Oh, absolutely. I just started since I'm retired.
Which is?
About 8 years. Mm-hmm. So, it's fun.
How did you find out about it?
I belong to Oasis, and some of the members of Oasis that I took watercolor there had told me about Sister Jo's class, so that's how come I found out about it.
How long have you been working?
Working what?
With this class here.
Oh, I think this is my third class term here.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty good.
As you see, it is not just an ordinary art class.
Well, 2 or 3 years ago, I became interested in Sister Jo and her classes. So I came to Maria Center, and I've enjoyed it enormously. Sister is quite an inspiration. Her paintings are beautiful. So I started in, and because I always loved to just draw. And then I took the watercolors, and Sister taught me, and I said I've enjoyed it immensely. Some of the things I have done have turned out very nicely. And from the first painting until the ones that I have now, there's quite a difference, so that I know I have learned a lot.
Sister Jo has a knack of coming up with new techniques. In almost every class, we learn something new. How to get the paint to flow, how you get your contrast and color so that the shadows show up, or the sunlight, or whatever that is involved in the picture.
Sister Jo welcomes interaction with her students. Let's look for a moment as we see the art unfold.
Under here. And then on the base, see, this stops too short here. It should be coming down at least a little bit, sort of a vertical effect. And on a base, it would not curve that way. It would curve according to the base. See, and bring it on down. And let's put the yellow there and show that stem a little more. See, you can see through the glass and see the stem in there, and that's what we want to bring out, see? Now you can see the stems of your flowers.
The class I'm taking is watercolors, and we all get to work at our own pace on our own designs or our own sketches, and she freely offers us advice when we ask it, lets us alone when we don't, and it's just a very nice afternoon, keeps us going. Doing art is just a wonderful, I guess, extension of what you see outside, and I love to look at sunsets and colors and people's faces, and I'm taking the class to get better, to learn some parts of the watercolor media that I don't know how to accomplish. You know, I can't do what I see and what I want to do, so I am learning to do those things.
And she knows all the little shortcuts to do for watercoloring. And so I decided to start in her class at the school, and it is such a beautiful room that I was so inspired. I looked out the window, and there's the Mississippi River and the trees and the shadow of fall coming, and I just sat down there and painted through that window.
You're just in time now to join me for one of Sister Jo's art demonstrations, which she's giving to Betty, one of her students. You can look over my shoulder as I watch. Come, let's enter quietly and spend a few moments here as Sister Jo gives her demonstration.
Hello, you are entering my working studio. There's many things going on in this studio, and everything's out and around. There's just a lot of exciting things going on in this studio. So we're going to have a little lesson tonight on autumn and autumn leaves. I am Sister JO Nemec, a school sister of Notre Dame of the St. Louis province, and I'm going to have a lesson with Betty Pfaff here on Leafin It To JO. This is an example of what can happen when you use real leaves and use them in your painting. I don't mean real leaves in this particular painting, but it used it to make the leaves. So we'll get busy now, and I'll show you the different techniques that could lead to this type of painting. First of all, we get real leaves. It's a little hard at this time of year to get them that aren't brittle. But you take the leaf, and we're going to use liquid acrylic, and it's a gloss varnish medium. It's water soluble. I put a little bit of color in it merely because I couldn't see it on the paper. So we will take the leaf. There we go. We paint the back of the leaf because the back of the leaf has these ridges and veins in it, and we want them to come forth onto the paper. Now I know this is white and you think I'm putting it on a white paper, but you're going to see what's going to happen within time to this leaf. Okay, we turn the leaf down and lay it on a section of the paper and press it very carefully. Leaves can be very brittle as they become old and in autumn and fall off of trees. But we press it down and then we pull it up. Now you can't see anything because it's white. Now another time I took the leaf and put this gloss medium on, and then I put some paint on the leaf. When I pressed it down, you can see that it is a leaf. But I wanted to use both techniques on the same paper. Now Betty, would you like to try one of these?
Okay.
Let's give her a pretty leaf. How about this one?
Okay.
Does that look good to you? And here's the brush. And there's your matte medium. Be sure it's the glossy kind, because if it's just plain matte medium, it's too dull, and then it won't get you that crystal shining leaf effect that you'll get later. This actually preserves the leaves. After you put this on and let it dry, you can use these same leaves over and over again. So if you want to preserve leaves for any reason, this is a good way to do it, because you put it on the wrong side, and you can put them down and they'll look very pretty on the right side. Put this one over here. We're going to put it aside because if we left it there, I might get caught into it before it dries. Very nice. Very good. Okay, now gently press and make sure you get all those edges. Now hold one part of it as you pull it up. Good, good. Okay, now we're going to move right along here because this has to dry. So, I'm going to show you a different technique, and as we do this technique, you'll see how it all fits together later. We are now finished with this. Where did I put the, here's the lid. Don't want to leave it open, it would dry up. Okay, now I'm going to take and put some paint on the leaf. It's a dry leaf, and we put paint on it. We're going to use the more earthy colors right here. We'll use some yellow ochre and put this on the leaf, on the veins. Get some brown madder, some Indian red, and some burnt umber, and fill all the way out to the end of the leaf, because we want to get the edges also. And you don't have to paint carefully because it's just going to squash it down anyway. But fill it all out. All right, and we position it on the paper and we press it down very gently and try to get all areas pushed down. And then lift the stem carefully. I didn't get enough paint on that one, so we'll do another one over further. The paint needs to be a little bit thicker. Our paint has dried, so we'll water it up a bit. So one way to get your paint going is to spray a little water on them, so they're ready when you get there. Because you can use watercolor over and over again. All you have to do is activate it with water. Acrylics and oil are wasted. You know, once you get them out, they dry up and you can't use them anymore. But watercolor doesn't work that way. So you can always have them out. But really, if you're going to use a lot of colors, you should moisten the whole palette. But we're just doing the earth colors. Let's hope we have enough this time. Press on the leaf. And another thing you can do is take that same, leave the leaf there, and take a little contrasting color. We'll use a little yellow-green here, and you paint around the leaf. Doesn't that look like fun, Betty?
Yes, it does.
Paint around the leaf. Now, before this paint dries, we kind of pull it out and let it gradually get lighter. It might look like it's a little bit sloppy, but it really isn't. It'll come out in the end. It all comes out in the wash.
Okay. Good thing.
Good thing it's watercolor. There we go. Now we're going to have other things going on here, so you don't have to worry about that hard line that you're going to have there. We kind of diluted it out a bit. Okay, there we go. Now we've got an example of using the positive by putting the paint on the leaf, and then a negative by painting around it. Some people have a hard time understanding the difference between positive painting and negative. But once you get it, it makes a lot of sense. Okay, now Betty, which leaf would you like to try?
How about this one?
Okay, here's your brush. Maybe you want to use a bigger brush, or that might work better. Let's try a bigger brush. I was using an awful sharp one. A flat brush is nice, but it doesn't hold as much paint as that round one will. Any color you want on there. But pretty thick and use a lot of paint. It gets on your fingers, but it washes right off. It's not near as messy. Now this will get on your fingers too when you're using it, but it's not really a problem because it will wash off and it just kind of peels off. I don't know why, but I didn't get much on me this time. That's unusual. You know what I'm going to do here? While that's still a little wet, I'm going to sprinkle a little salt on there. And it'll give a little bit of effect. And if I don't have enough water, I'll make a little water. If there's no water, it won't activate the salt. So the salt can affect the pigment. There we go. Now, you see what the salt's doing with the water? It's kind of making a design there. It looks like I wanted to do that. And I really did. I just didn't know it yet.
Pick up a little green.
Yes. Keep the more dull green. Don't get into those blue greens.
Okay, I think this is ready to go.
Okay. Where you want to put it?
Come on down here.
That's fine. Okay, Betty, let's see how that turned. Oh, yours is prettier than mine. I'm jealous.
That's too bad. Sorry. That's beautiful.
Isn't that pretty, though? I like that.
I had all those
It
wonderful
has
bands.
many different colors in it, too. Oh, great. Okay, now that we've gotten this particular technique, we want to move to another one so we can get to the finished product. Could you bring the other picture back? I believe it's dry now. Does it feel dry? Good. Okay, now see that nice big brush? We're going to wash over this. We're going to do a wash which will bring out the colors, and you'll see that white crystal that we've been hiding from you. Here we go. Get some good earthy colors, and off we go. Here we go. Isn't that neat? See the white coming through here? The darker the color, the more the white will come through. And this is merely a background color. Put it a little bit darker here, we'll see our crystal. I learned this technique of using the crystal finish on there from a sister Corlita. She's a Mercy sister out at Mercy Center. And it's kind of fun. And then the next step I learned somewhere else, and I'm putting them all together. Would you like to finish doing that? Sure, Betty. I think you could handle it. Get some more paint on there. How do you like using that big brush?
Great.
Isn't that fun?
Covers a lot of territory.
I know. Now get a little bit of this
Okay.
fall color in there. We don't want pink on the background. You want to stick to fall colors, even though you lighten and darken them. But there's a lot of red in fall. A lot of red. A lot this year anyway. And while we're talking about colors, what started me to make this kind of painting was last year I got lost in the woods. I was at a retreat and it was getting dark and it was misty rain, and I was taking pictures of the forest floor. And I didn't realize that it was getting so late and I couldn't find my way back to the car, and I was getting really scared.
Oh my goodness.
And I did finally, get back and all, and everything was fine, but the experience was in my head. And the following Tuesday, the first painting that I showed you had been started, but it really developed, and I finished it that week. I just couldn't stop until I had it finished. It was like being back in the woods again, only it was nice and warm where I was painting. But that's a funny experience when you know it's getting dark, and you know you can slip on those wet leaves. Now that's fine, we'll let that dry. Now this is the finished product if you were using just the crystalline technique and then painting it and then going, and we're going to do a little negative painting, because unless we put some darks behind these leaves, these light colors, they won't come forward. And we're going to get into these darker browns. And as you do negative painting, you're actually like putting a stem in. But we're actually, here's the stem where I did not paint, and then over here is the negative part. Now I can put a little branch going out there and come in this way, and then up to here. And we have what we call negative painting. It's a tricky painting, but it makes paintings a lot more exciting. The background can get dull if it's just flat paint. But if you can see other leaves and twigs back there, it makes more sense, and it does bring it out. See how that dark now?
It gives it some depth.
Right. Okay. And see, the paint is still wet, and when you drop something darker in the wet, then it'll bring it out. Now, I may have dropped just a touch too much. Let me just put a little water on there and let it run. There we go. See, some people think you can't change watercolor, and there's certain stages you can do changes in watercolor. And I'm really following the things that are here, because when I paint over that crystallized part, it won't really stick to it. It just kind of floats off of it. Now notice I didn't make this as dark as that. You want to have variations in your dark, and maybe a little variations in the color. Not quite as brown, but more red brown to pull out that color. Here's a good negative spot. And as we develop this, you'll see that the crystal will sort of come out more. Now this paint will dry and it'll flatten, and then the crystallization will come forward. I'm going to show adding a little more color to one of these leaves. See, they're not standing out as much, but I want them to. So I'm going to brush color over them to darken them, and then that crystal part will come forth.
Yes.
And as we get more of the negative painting, and let's go back to the one that's finished. You can see here where we charged green on the leaf, and then there's more negative painting in there, and then went back in. There was a orange under there from the very first painting. Right. And then charging a little in here brings that out. You can bring it out more if you just put a little more paint on it.
Oh, yeah. That just pops up, doesn't it?
It pops it out. And if you get too much, you just put a little water, make it go down a bit. There we go. We'll let that dry. But that really is finished.
We had an opportunity to interview Sister Jo in her studio. We'd like to share some of that interview with you this evening. Sister Jo, when and how did you start teaching art?
I think I have taught art since I was a kid, because I'd always go in my dad's basement with print shop and his whatever I could, and anybody I could get, I would teach them. And when I taught grade school for my first career, for my first 13 years, I could bribe my children to do anything all week long, because then they'd have all Friday afternoon for art. They loved it. But I think they picked that up, whether you're enthused about it and if you want to do it. And I'd get interesting projects that they could do. But then I didn't teach art again for at least 25, 30 years. Because then I went in and I taught home ec for 20 years. And then I was administrator of the retreat house. So I didn't start teaching art again until when I started teaching here at Maria Center, when I taught the adults.
How do you explain teaching art as a ministry?
It might seem a little difficult to some people unless you understand that art is just a reflection of what God already created. And so anything that I produce or my students produce is what they've already seen somewhere in the creation of God. And to bring that fact to them, and now when they look at things just riding in a car, they can see the beauty of God and the power behind the creation that he created just by what we do in class. And you can't look at water and rain and snow and wonder, who could have thought of something like that? And that really, it brings it to their attention and to their mind and then to their heart, and gets in their heart, and then they express it creatively.
How do you feel you help people through your talent in art, and how do you give God glory through this talent?
First of all, I try to bring forth in them a talent that maybe they didn't know they had, and to help develop it. It gives them a hobby, because all these people are senior citizens. It gives them a hobby and something different to do than they've done all their life. And many are amazed that they can even draw something once you teach them a little perspective, and that they can paint. It's kind of exciting when you do it, and then they take the brush and do it, and they go, "Hey, sister, I did it." And then they try again, and then they do more. So it's not only the class that I teach them, but it's the interaction I have with them before class or after class or even during class. And several have come to my studio with a certain problem or to pick up framing, and we talk. And I write them if they're sick, send a card and call them on the phone, because I think that interaction's important. And I know them all so well now because they keep coming back to keep taking that same course. And they encourage one another. It's really neat to see them walk around and check up on each other, not only on the painting, but where they are in life, and to share. And I think that's important too, that I don't have to keep any kind of silence in the room, and they're real free to be with one another. They look forward to it, and they miss it. If they miss a class, they miss out, and they know it. And I think that's really neat. So I think giving glory to God, the only way I can do that is by helping someone else become closer to Him. And I think that's a really neat way, because I can't exactly see Jesus, but I can see Him in someone else. And that helps me many times to be able to spread Jesus a little further when I can give Him away to somebody else. I know it may sound far-fetched to some people, but that one-on-one that I didn't have time for when I taught a huge classroom all day long is kind of neat to have now. It's a different career, but it's a different time in my life.
Can you describe some of your achievements and accomplishments?
Well, I have ribbons, I have best to show, I have sometimes just an honorable mention, but depends on the size of the show. But I think, I was trying to think about that before when you mentioned it about achievements. I think the one painting, which is hard for me to pick out because I've done over 500 in the last 16 years, I think is when I was asked by the Mother House superiors to paint the front entrance of our Mother House. And I immediately said I could not do that, but I would take a photo. And they said okay. But later I thought about it, and I took a photo I had, which I had to use because a tree was blocking the photo at the time I was doing it. And I took one picture I'd taken in '83, and I thought, I'll see if I can draw it. Because it's a 5-story building with a tower on top. And I just didn't know if I knew enough architecture to do that. But once I had it drawn, I knew I could paint it.
Well, thank you so much, Sister Jo. We've certainly appreciated the opportunity to share with you this evening, and we thank you for all that you have shared with us. And thank you for joining us this evening. The School Sisters of Notre Dame have much good news to share with you, and we hope that you'll be able to join us again next week. Until then, may God bless your lives with a heart that is open to all of the beauty that surrounds you in its simplest detail.